Welcome to Bespoken Bones with your host, Pavini Moray, connecting ancestors, sex, magic, and science. Pavini explores transpersonal tools for erotic wellness every new and full moon, engaging educators, healers, spiritual leaders, and scientists in revolutionary dialogue. Get ready to feel good and go deep. This is Bespoken Bones.
Hi, and welcome to Bespoken Bones, ancestors at the crossroads of sex, magic, and science. We are healing trauma, connecting with our roots, and developing radiant erotic wellness in past, present, and future generations. And I am your host, Pavini Moray. I want to say hi to the folks who've been reaching out about the podcast. Hi, Xander. Thank you for the kind words about the show. Really, folks, keep reaching out with feedback, suggestions, support, questions, really encouraging your engagement. You can use the contact form on the podcast website, which is bespokenbones.com, to be in touch. So today, it is my deep delight to introduce you to Mika Banks. And she is a massage therapist and a quantum energetic practitioner and an all-around special being. Her work centers freeing emotional stagnation both in the physical body and throughout the mental, emotional, and spiritual bodies. She is the founder and facilitator of Ancestral Brunch, and we'll be hearing more about that, which is a group celebration which processes and clears harmful patterns that affect our lineages and us. And you can learn more about Mika's work at www.mikabanksmassage.com. I'm going to spell it for you. MikaBanks, mikabanksmassage.com. Hi, Mika. Welcome.
Hi, how's it going?
Great. It's so lovely to have you here on the show. And, I was actually having brunch with a human in the flesh friend this week. And I was going on and on about ancestors, and she asked a really fair question.
Yes.
She's not an ancestor practitioner herself.
Okay.
She said, how do you know who you are working with? How do you know that the ones that you're working with are well? How do you know that they are who they say they are? How do you know that they have your best interest at heart? And I think that when people are working with ancestors, there's often this thing about sensitivity, about being open, but then not really knowing how to discern kind of who's who and what's what, and also how to negotiate with the dead. And people think, right, because they're dead, they're somehow like these mystical, benevolent beings automatically.
Right. Nope.
And I know that, as a massage therapist, you have really gone through a process of learning about boundaries with the dead. And so it would be great if you would I would love to hear just some of your story about how you came into that boundaries practice and in your ancestral relating.
Okay, so I feel like this boundaries practice is something that's been growing, honestly, my entire life. And it's something that first practicing boundaries with the living and learning how to set boundaries with the living was a really, really wonderful and great segue into the work that I'm currently doing, which is learning how to set boundaries and work with the dead. And it really is a very similar thing about setting boundaries. It's both the way that you set them with the living is a very similar way to the way that you set them with the dead. And when the dead, it's this added issue of not necessarily seeing someone in front of you to realize that your boundaries are being infiltrated, right? It becomes this, this greater sort of psychic perceptive thing. Anyway, so getting back to the point, setting boundaries. Oh my God, I'm so nervous. I'm so sorry.
Oh, it's so great. You're doing great. Yeah. So you're putting your hands on people's bodies. You're working with people's bodies, and you started to realize that things weren't what they seemed energetically, and that you had to learn about boundaries. Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay. I was like, wow, first time I've done this. That's totally awkward. Okay. So,
hey, that's real. That is real. Right?
It's so real. So, okay, then I am going to start with the physical experience of being a younger kid and not knowing how to set boundaries. And it started with my family, like having some really intense people around me that thankfully, I didn't have the experience of my physical boundaries being endangered, but my emotional, energetic boundaries were very much sort of trod upon on a regular basis, or at least I had the perception of that. And so I got involved in martial arts early in my life, thankfully. It kind of came in, and I see it as a huge gift. And within my martial arts training, I was in this wonderful studio that involved practices in boundary setting, in verbal boundary setting, not just physical boundary setting, practices in I am statements. So basically, or I feel, I perceive that this is happening, I experience it this way, and this is what I need. And I took that information and applied it to all the situations and settings in my family and in my life around me with friends of starting to set those verbal boundaries to sort of define my space, define my energetic space. And then, you fast forward into later on in life becoming a massage therapist, because I was really drawn to helping the body, that healer identity, right? That I've tried to get away from ever since, the idea of I have to be a healer, or I am a healer, more like I'm just me. And I get to express this part of me that loves helping others through being just me. Well, in that expression, in the early expression of wanting to help heal people so much, I actually realized I was pulling in people's pain into my body and just storing it there. Because I didn't know that A, I was doing that, B, how to help people in any other way. And I was doing amazing physical things for their system and their body and their emotional body. And my body was going through lots of changes of having more and more pain, more and more stagnation, more and more injury, and more issue. And it wasn't until years later, like I knew things needed to shift, and I knew I felt so heavy and full of stagnation that I didn't know how to clear. And it wasn't until years later when I was yet again led to, and I say led to because, you have that idea so many times, but it takes you a while before you act on it. And then all of a sudden, when you decide to act on the idea of getting help, magically there's something there that's exactly what you need. And so I followed the breadcrumb and of basically this person I was referred to who did energy work. And when she tuned into my energy, she just basically expressed to me that you have so much of other people's energy in your system. And it starts from your parents and all of your family. It starts from, everyone you've ever met. Basically, you've been like, I'm going to help you by pulling in your pain, and didn't know how to release it. So what did she do for me? She helped clear it all out, which was amazing. And then it was a whole new world in a lot of ways because I felt so much freer in my personal body. And that was the moment when I realized just how weak my energetic boundaries actually were. Because I suddenly had so much sensitivity that I didn't know how to not be energetically and emotionally inside of someone else's body when I was standing in front of them.
Can you actually speak a little bit to that? Because I think that's going to resonate with a lot of folks, especially folks who are more empathic or who do identify as healers, that just what's the actual process that's happening when you're like saying that you're inside someone else's body or they're inside your body? I mean, I know you're not talking about sex, but what's actually going on there?
So it goes back to the idea that none of us are separate, right? I mean, we're all energetic beings. When you reduce us down to our basest form, we're all these little zipping around electrons, protons, these molecules, these light photons. And so we all have this interconnectivity. And when you're energetically sensitive enough, you can feel how connected you are to everyone else. And when you feel into that, sometimes you'll get information with it. When you feel, you can literally stand and feel someone else's emotions. You can be with them in that process. And while they are in real time processing through emotions that they can't even sense or see themselves. And it's a beautiful gift. It's a strong gift of really being able to sense and feel what is happening emotionally with people around you. And it's also a really tough one because, for a lot of reasons, because sometimes they're not aware of what they're feeling themselves. And you will also be able to sense that. I remember being in a conversation with someone and they were telling me about something they experienced that had really scared the mess out of them. And I know that because I felt this giant spike of fear as they were telling it. And my response to them as I was talking with them was, oh, that must have been really scary. And immediately I felt something inside of them respond to the fact that I had said the word fear. And then I felt a response that basically can be likened to the phrase, I'm not afraid, which was totally a valid response. And then I felt the energy transition to something else that was easier to process for them, for their brain. And then what they said out loud to me was, no, it wasn't fear, it was trauma. And that's an idea, like a little inkling of the layers that we'll put on, sort of an emotional issue to shift it into something that we can actually palate and process when we're thinking rationally. Anyway, so that story was me in real time realizing just how intensely I was feeling someone's emotion and how differently they were experiencing it themselves. And I honor both of the experiences as completely valid, but I also have to honor my experience of very strongly feeling people's emotions and knowing what I know. So that's one of the ways when what you're perceiving is so different than what the people around you are perceiving, you feel like you have no voice to be able to communicate that to anyone without being called crazy or you're wrong or you're projecting or receiving some sort of backlash on it. And then on top of that, when you can feel everyone else's emotions, it can be a very overwhelming experience, physically, emotionally, mentally. When you're having a bad day and having horrible feelings and emotions, that's hard enough. When you compound that with walking down the street and you are not able to stay separate, quote unquote, separate from everyone else who's having a bad day or having really intense emotions or has something really wrong going with them, it's borderline debilitating for the system. So you'll see people, how do people respond to it? Like I did this for a few years where you hide away. You tuck yourself in somewhere that feels safe so that you can have a rest from feeling everyone else's emotions. When what is most helpful, and this was my process of learning, is realizing that there can be a different way, and B, that if you're feeling through other people's emotions, the boundary issue is equally yours as much as it is theirs. Equally yours responsibility to work with as much as it is their responsibility to work with, or just their issue. And I also have known and felt emotions put upon me a lot, like, energy thrown at me, emotions, the idea that energy or emotions can be thrown at you, which is absolutely true. But when you have when you have really strong filter systems and energy boundaries, you can actually, those emotions that you feel like are being put upon you or thrown at you will be deflected off. And I've had this experience of, in the beginning, not being able to filter anything from getting to me, whether they be great emotions or not great emotions, to now, and I'm still working on it, but having a much better time. I can actually go to bars again. I can actually walk around again. I can be around people. I could be in big groups of people and feel safe within myself, feel like I have some structural integrity, some energetic integrity, some emotional integrity, and I can feel what's quote unquote mine and differentiate between what's mine and what isn't, what is other.
Yeah, this is super important, I think, in terms of relating with ancestors, especially like the discernment piece.
Yeah.
So I want to probe a little bit further into this, if it's okay.
Please.
Because like I think that, again, folks who have, you named it, folks who have these gifts of emotional sensitivity, often they have developed these gifts as response to trauma, right? Like this is a survival response of like really being able to read very, very subtle cues and receive information from their surroundings, right? It's a survival thing. And so like there's a layer of when you ask folks who are more boundary diffuse to like, hey, you might want to shore up that boundary, you might want to get some muscle around that, right? That can be really frightening. Like, or, like, well, why would I want to do that if that's the way that I have contact with the spirit world, right? Or B, like, if I put on like that layer of padding so that I can't be so sensitive, I might miss something, and it might be not so safe for me anymore. So I'm wondering, you said that now you are able to like go into groups of people, you can be out in the world again, you don't have to hide away. Would you be willing to speak a little bit about the actual boundary practices that you're doing and that I know that you also teach?
I do. I teach dance and I teach energy work seminars. Yeah, which is a very interesting place and a really important place to be able to and need to hold boundaries, hold space for yourself and for others. So I have a lot of practices, quite frankly, because for me, I'm one of those people, and I've come to think of it as boundary fluidity, as opposed to, for me, I need a lot of different resources because the same one doesn't work every day of the week. The same one doesn't work every moment of the day for me. And it really is dependent on the situation. So I have both energetic practices, I have physical practices, I have imaginary practices, I have taking space, and I do all of them interchangeably and fluidly throughout the day. So one of the easiest ways is actually physically taking space. If you want to bring it to the physical level, physically taking a step back, physically finding a quiet place where you can hang out for a moment and regroup, physically where you can send calming energy down from your system, imagining yourself traveling into the earth, finding a beautiful, whatever element you resonate with the most. I love doing it elementally, whether it be the fire that lives in the earth, the air that's in the air pockets in the earth, the water, the actual dirt and grit itself, or any metals. And finding that and allowing your energy to just connect with that, help it be restored, and then travel back up to you. The restored energy traveling back up to yourself. Simply that in and of itself will bring you a certain peace, which will help you as you're trying to allow yourself to have more focused boundaries. So that's one of the things that I'll do. And it can be called a grounding ceremony. The thing that I had to learn when I was grounding myself was to not just send all of my energy into the earth and leave it there, because that's also not helpful to the system. That actually will leave you feeling depleted. So if any of you feel like you're grounding and it doesn't ever work, it might be that you're sending too much of your energy in there and not allowing it to return into your system. So that's important information for some of you out there. Other people might need to ground to their places of power that maybe aren't on this planet. Maybe you connect to a moon energetically and you don't know about it consciously, but you can allow yourself to send your energy and the restoring energy to come back to just say all of your places of power, wherever they may be, and allow that to come back to you and fill up your soul. There are wonderful things you can do, energetically speaking, with putting, I know lots of people have heard of putting bubbles around yourself. Bubbles are circles, and they can be any material you need them to be. They can be any color you need them to be. If you have a color you resonate with, you can call in the color blue and put a blue circle around yourself. Or for me, I'll put a blue circle around my voice right now, because speaking is always something that is both exhilarating and intimidating for me. So you put a protective circle around yourself and imagine it's there. You can also do it this way, where you say, okay, whatever is the best color circle for me for protection right now, have that come in and surround me. And you can feel surrounded in it. That's if you're visual. If you're auditory, you can hear yourself in a silent place. You can hear yourself in the woods. You can hear music of, that song that maybe you had a relative who used to sing to you and you felt so protected by them, or a friend, because not all of us have good relative experiences, right? So a friend, and you can hear that song and feel that protection, and all of a sudden you have more protection and more boundaries around you. You can also do it with any element. The first time I ever thought of, quote unquote, shielding, the idea of bringing in some sort of protection around me, I actually found myself feeling like I was surrounded by a waterfall. It felt really beautiful. And water is the element that's most closely associated with emotions. So that element really helped filter out some of the emotional debris that was coming, that I was sensing around me, and helped me be able to feel the difference between myself and others. There's also, there's physical practices. Any type of martial arts are great. They're really great in learning how to do boundaries. Tai Chi, Qigong, any of these practices will help naturally strengthen your physical boundaries and your energetic emotional boundaries. Talk therapy is a great way to learn about, discuss, talk through, and in practice actually do some healing around your energetic boundaries. And for me, practice in general, because I am a person that has a hard time, I feel really bogged down if I'm trying to do the same thing every day at the same time. Some people live for it. It actually heals them so much to have that exact practice at the same time every day. I have friends, it's funny, my friends and I were just like, they described the thing that made them feel so good, and for me it sounds like torture. And then I described the thing that made me feel so good, and for them they're like, oh my God, I can't do that. And we just laugh, because that's humanity, right? Everyone is different. So having a bunch of different tools and possibilities, there's so many access points into helping to heal your personal boundaries and to helping to keep structure around you in a way that is positive and beneficial and helpful, and in a way that can help to deflect some of the resonant energies and emotions and feelings and thoughts and everything that come at you from other places.
Would you speak a little bit to that in terms of ancestors? And
yes,
because
that's why we're here.
That's why we're here. And so this idea again, basically, that we do get to set boundaries with our living family and with our dead family, right?
Yep.
And so just kind of what kind of experiences have you had, and what would you share around how to engage in safe, respectful ancestor work that utilizes these skills of boundaries?
Right. So everything that I've said thus far are also how I go about in setting boundaries with my ancestry. I do it verbally, where I'm literally, someone who saw me from the outside might think you're crazy, because I'm literally talking to the air around me, but I know who I'm talking to, and I'm speaking to them saying, this is a boundary that I'm setting. You are not allowed to infiltrate my space. I've heard of people saying office hours, business hours, I have time in my day to communicate with you between these hours, but please do not, talk to me or try to, please do not interfere with what I'm doing in these other times, in any other time but this. Basically, ancestors are just they're people. They were people. They're still, their essence, even though they've returned to their energetic form, their essence is very similar to what they were like when they were here. So if that person wasn't a good person, chances are they're not a great, being on the other side. And if you are super energetically open, like I was, especially in the beginning when I started working with this, I mean, I would wonder why I wasn't feeling well. And I'd book an energy work session with who's now my mentor, one of the first people who worked with me. And it would be because I had like 3 different ancestors living inside of my body, my aura, my wherever, or hanging out really closely and just kind of messing with me. And it took getting clearer and clearer and more specific with them. Like, this is what I find okay. This is absolutely unacceptable. I love you anyway. I understand that you're my ancestry. I come from me. I very much, extremely, extremely am grateful for you having been here. I have empathy and compassion for what you have gone through. This is my life, and these are my terms. This is what I need. And I'm okay with expressing what I need. It's important, and I need you to respect that. And then if I've had, there were a couple ancestors that I had that really were not respectful of my wishes. They would continually come into my energy, into my body, where it literally felt like someone's dropping into me, and I could feel that I was there, but I didn't feel like I was alone inside of myself. And if you have had that experience before, you know what I'm talking about. If you've not, it's a really bizarre feeling to not feel like you're alone within inside of yourself. And I knew I wasn't crazy, which is very nice, quote unquote crazy, whatever that even means. But I knew that I was experiencing something, and that it was valid, and that it was important. And when this kept happening, I literally had one ancestor drop in at one point because they love to eat food, and it really wanted to eat the burger that I was eating. And it wouldn't let me. I literally couldn't move my hand. I had the food in my hand, and I wanted to take a bite, but I couldn't move my arm because they wouldn't let me, because they wanted me to give them permission to eat the food through me. This is completely unacceptable. And I'm sure some of people out there, especially if they're super sensitive, have had experiences like this. And I finally had to ask my other ancestors for help. The ones that are benevolent, it's a great word to use. The ones that are offering beneficial energy for you. The ones that are here to help you in the truest version of help, not on their terms, but on your terms, and on the terms of what is the most beneficial for you. And I had to basically ask them to come through and help them get that individual off of me. And then after that, I went to work on, okay, where are my boundaries weak? Why are they weak? How do I help these heal? What practices do I need to do to bring these in? Because this was happening at a time before I realized that doing ancestral work would be something that I was going to be doing later on in my life. At the time, it was just all of a sudden there were just all these beings wanting to talk to me, and these ancestors wanting to talk to me. And so they would just come in because I had no rules about what was okay and what wasn't okay. So I went through this large process of healing myself yet again, helping to shift patterns of not having good boundaries. And that was interesting, finding what was underneath all of that too.
Yeah, it's super helpful because I think that there's there's often I don't know if it's a dynamic, but there's a judgment of people who have boundaries and people who don't have boundaries, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that what I hear you saying is that this is a process of learning boundaries, and it's really based in, it's so individual, right? Of what we each feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
And I also, there was something that was really important, because I really believe that the dead can change, right? That they're not necessarily, who we knew them to be, that there's more ancient well ones. And
Yeah.
I love that you said that you called in the well ones, the brighter, beneficial ones for help. Because I've actually had that as well, of like being like, okay, guys, like, come have my back, right?
Yeah.
Like, help me learn to help me learn to have my own back, but like, could you help strengthen these boundaries? And I think that that's a really beautiful thing. And I just don't think there's a lot of, like, we talk a lot about relational boundaries, but I think that the energetic boundary thing isn't so clearly highlighted in the conversation. Would you speak a little bit? I know in your work, the ancestral habits and patterns are something that you're working on, like with the ancestral work, to shift patterns that are ancestral. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I love that topic. So in the beginning, when I first started working with ancestors, I was doing it a little bit I was working too hard. Let's put it that way. I was really trying to I would probe through the ancestry to find the areas of like pain. Oh, there's a blockage there. Okay, well, let's free that. Oh, there's a blockage there. Let's free that. And I started working differently when I realized that wasn't having the effects that it was having on myself and on the one or two friends that I was doing this with, because I wasn't doing this yet with a group of people. It wasn't harmonious. It was more of a tough process, and there was backlash from ancestors that just didn't want to change. So what I do when I'm doing ancestral work is I create a space, a safe space. There's lots of protective measures, and yet again, a very strong container, very strong boundaries. And what I do is I offer a place for whatever ancestors are wanting to unburden themselves of anything. Let go. Let go. That thing when you're finally ready to face it and let it go and be done with it, that's what I offer to the ancestors, because a lot of them are very much wanting to alleviate themselves of things that they've...
Does the word atonement, is that a good word to use there?
It is and it isn't. Some of them do want to atone. There's that idea of letting go so that they can make up for, because it's both like... Atonement is a wonderful word, but there's also a victimhood to it. There can be, because the idea of atoning can feel like you've done something bad. And when you feel like you've done something bad, you're holding on to tremendous guilt, So it is a wonderful word, because if you feel like you've done something bad, you probably have done something, maybe you've done something not great. And so it's beautiful to want to make up for that. I love that. And I have plenty of ancestors, and even myself, that's what drives them. But ultimately, that is really helpful. It's going to be amazing for the other people. But then where are you left? Where does that leave you if you're still holding the guilt and you always feel like you have to atone? So I see atonement as a beautiful stage and step in releasing, and it's absolutely something that I celebrate and think is wonderful. And also, if people are wanting to go there, and the ancestors are wanting to go there, that's when I gently prompt them, okay, are you now ready to forgive yourself? Are you ready to let yourself let go of all of the guilt and continue to do good by releasing even the guilt that you're holding, which helps the collective, which helps the energy of you being able to forgive yourself gives other people permission to be able to forgive, and then use the full power of what you have, like that augmented energy that you have, to go forth and do good on a great scale. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Thanks
Yeah.
for the clarification.
Yeah. So what I do is I offer basically them a space, anyone, whether it's I stubbed my toe and it hurt so much, I held on to that pain forever, and I carried it with me until the day I died. Or I created this, I burnt this house down, or I, genocide, or whatever, the sexual assault, or being assaulted or anything. It's basically from the tiny end of the spectrum to the astronomical end of the spectrum. I basically offer them a non-judgmental space to say, if you're ready to let go of even the tiniest bit, this is your place. And whatever you want to keep, I'm not going to try to force you to let go of. I'm just extending a hand. So what happens is the transformation is both subtle and profound. The first time I did this seminar, I found myself afterwards the happiest I have ever been. And that wasn't my intention. My intention wasn't, I want to be the happiest I've ever been after my seminar. It was just, hey, let's let some stuff go and see what happens. And what happened for me was that I was just glowing in a way, and it's sustained, that I didn't even understand or expect. Things that have happened in other seminars. One of the fascinating things that I tracked, now that I do give my seminars more intention, the first seminar that one of the other seminars that I did, the intention was to free up any ancient wisdoms, like for our ancestors that were more connected to the earth, connected to the beings on the planet, connected to, the animals, connected to nature, connected to their inherent magical abilities, their senses, their awareness. Those beings that were super connected and super aware, they have wisdom there. And that wisdom is desperately needing to come through to the planet now, that awareness. So the intention to that seminar was, okay, whoever's ready to release anything that's preventing that awareness getting through all the way to us, let's let that happen so that awareness and those gifts can come through. And after that seminar, it was really funny. I had one person who attended, and they did this really funny thing afterwards. And ultimately, the short version is they realized that they had let go of patterns of control, really extreme control, and feeling like they had to play within the lines of society of, if I drive, if it's an empty parking lot, I still have to follow the arrows, because if I don't, something bad's going to happen. And they noticed that this had shifted and changed, because the moment they drove away from the seminar and their wife is sitting next to them, they were in an empty parking lot, and they just started driving across it to get to the exit, because there was no one there and it was safe to do so. And this was apparently their wife just looked at them and was like, whoa, who are you? What are you doing? This is amazing. You're doing something completely different than is of your normal patterns. And basically, that's when they realized that it fed into this idea of control, and it fed into this whole thought process that they were completely unaware of, that transformed simply because that was something that was let go of.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's just really cool to see what can happen
Yeah.
when we start attending to these things on both the personal and the ancestral levels. Mika, I want to ask you, because I know that you were talking about the seminars. You have some offerings coming up, and I just want to mention those and then give you a chance to, if you want to say anything about them. You have a Bold Boundaries seminar on July 22nd. Oh, and I guess I should say that you are in the San Francisco Bay Area.
I am.
And so these offerings are obviously here.
So
you have the Bold Boundaries seminar on July 22nd.
Yes.
And then you have your next ancestral brunch, which I think you have almost every month.
I do. It's pretty close. They give me dates.
That's great.
They're very specific.
And we're hungry now. August 4th, and there's more info on your website, which again is mikabanksmassage.com. And then also you're going to be leading an ancestral seminar at Burning Man at the Star Roadhouse. That's amazing. How fun is that?
For all of you burners out there, which I don't necessarily consider myself a diehard burner, but I actually really love it there. So
that's great. Yeah, bringing the work to the desert. It's fantastic. So yeah, I just want to encourage folks to check out your offerings, and also just really thank you for being willing to share the practices that you're doing in being a person who has that sensitivity and also wants to work with ancestors in a way that's like effective and doesn't take on, too much crap, right? So thanks for being a person, because I've been wanting to talk with somebody about like, okay, how exactly do we do this boundaries thing with ancestors? So
it's one of those topics that's both so important and for me so sprawling at the same time. It's like to get the specific practices for me vary from moment to moment. So I love narrowing it down and bringing it into something that's tangible to give people advice to help for their own personal daily lives and practices. The ancestral brunch is the what I was describing beforehand. It's a big celebration as well as deep energetic shifting and clearing and transformation. Yeah, and the fun thing about it is that it's a very lighthearted affair that does deep work. And that is something that I find to be rare. Usually you go into your transformational event and it's very, it's heavy.
Serious. This is very serious transformational business.
I'm here to transform. Yes. So mine's a lot more lighthearted.
Yeah.
But
there's food too.
There's so much food. Oh my God, because the ancestors get so specific about, this is the time when you're like, okay, 3 dishes, what do you want? And they have to arm wrestle with each other to figure out who gets to get the dish. But and then you prepare a meal for them, or 1 or 2 dishes, it doesn't matter, but you prepare food for them. And I've had requests, everything from something as easy as we want black licorice to we want this homemade shrimp cocktail and we're going to tell you exactly how to make it. And it's been amazing. And so all the food, it's like this great smorgasbord, and we eat, we chat, and then the ancestors show up and everyone gets to work in a really fun way, and we end and feel great. The boundary seminar is going to be really neat. It's both, yet again, my seminars are always in a lot of energy work as well as strategies and practicing. So it'll be healing on, sometimes we have a hard time holding energetic boundaries because there are parts of our energy body that are actually missing or damaged. And so how I will work is I actually help bring in as much as I can shifting of and firming up sort of and healing the, helping to repair the energetic damage that potentially is there within our energetic boundaries. And for those of you who are listening right now, I'm giving you a little tune-up right now, sending you some energy through to help tune up and shore up any of those energetic boundary issues that may be damaged. But
yeah, and I imagine that you'll go more into depth with the stuff that we talked about.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome. Great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Mika, it's been so lovely to have you here, and I just want to finish with a prayer for your ancestors and my ancestors and for the ancestors of everyone who's listening. Oh, ancestors, we're so blessed to have this shot on Earth right now and to be the face of these lines. We're so blessed, and we're thankful for your guidance and your wisdom and all the ways that you support us in our lives. So thanks, ancestors, and thanks for supporting the interview. I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode of Bespoken Bones. And if you feel really inspired by what you heard, I'd love to hear from you. You can go to trancestralhealing.com and you can learn more there about the sexual and ancestral wellness work that I offer in my practice. I really want to encourage you to keep the messages coming, the questions, the people you want to hear on the show, feedback, comments, anything that's coming up for you, just please be in touch. I'm Pavini Moray, and I will be back every full and new moon with more embodied goodness and ancestral wisdom.